Good afternoon. I'm Lillian Lodge Kopenhaver, Executive Director of the Kopenhaver Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication here at Florida International University. And I'm delighted to welcome you to our Leadership Webinar Series. The mission of our center is to empower young women professionals and academics in all of the fields of communication to develop visionaries and leaders who can make a difference in their communities and in their professions. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker this afternoon. Milagros Repilado is a senior manager for the Digital and Social Partnerships team at NBCUniversal Telemundo Enterprises, where she focuses on developing strategy and new business models. A marketing and advertising professional with more than 15 years of industry experience, Repilado's strong business acumen and expertise in project and team management have been instrumental throughout her career. She started her professional journey on the advertising agency side, working for one of the nation's top independent Hispanic advertising firms at the time, Zuby Advertising. There, Repilado developed a deep passion for marketing to the U.S. Hispanic consumer and empowering minority groups to their fullest potential. Our speaker today considers herself an educator at the core and believes wholeheartedly in the strength of education and that knowledge is power. So after spending almost a decade in the world of advertising, she took a short pause and taught for 2 years. It was a remarkable life-changing experience for her, she said, which further reaffirmed for her how powerful excellent leadership can be and how instrumental it is to be someone who can lift others up. Repilado strongly believes that with a strong, solid business objective, thought-out game plan, and true leadership, teams can accomplish anything. She obtained her bachelor's degree in communications with a minor in psychology from FIU and is currently working on her graduate degree in administration and organizational leadership from Barry University. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. Well, as Dr. Kopenhaver mentioned, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. So thank you for having me. And really, my objective today is to, have a dialogue with the group. I really want to, hopefully through the experience that I have and, the trajectory of my career, really share with you some insight. I was thinking leading up to this presentation today about the audience, right? The group that I'm going to be speaking to. And you're in such a remarkable position where when it comes to digital and social media, no one owns the space like you do. I think, there's any group, any generation that is the expert in that area would be everyone sitting in this room, right? So again, today what I want to definitely bring to the group is, how do you couple that and how do you really start to develop your personal brand, as you approach graduation, as you start to hit those landmarks where you're going to start looking for your next career path and, you're putting yourself out into the world market. So, the basis of our talk today will be how do you create that personal brand really in a world of digital and social media. So with that, if we can go ahead and please feel free to, ask questions as we go. Like I mentioned, I definitely, want this to be a dialogue. So, going to the first slide. When I was in school, I graduated about 20 years ago, more or less, the thought of a digital footprint was something that I never had to think about. Digital and social media wasn't a thing. You represented yourself to a potential employer or even, out into the community in a much, much different way. So, I ask all of you, when you hear the term digital footprint, what comes to mind? Is there anything specific that you... Social media. Anything else as it pertains to you? 100%. That's exactly what it is. I think, particularly for your generation, your digital footprint is something that you're establishing as you go. Anything that you put out there really is out there, and it's out there for the end of time, and there's a beauty with, social media and the digital space where it's spontaneous and you want to be authentic and you want to have fun. But I think there's also a magic when you're authentic and you're very deliberate about what you're putting out there. And that's particularly what I want us to just focus on today and really talk about. You know, when you look at the power of social media, and I'm sure most of you know this, but it's impressive when you look at it as a whole, right? You look at Facebook. Facebook has over 2 billion monthly active users. Anything that you put out there, this is the audience, this is the potential reach that you have. And being cognizant of that, again, is particularly important. You know, Facebook constitutes 79% of Americans who are online. Again, this is our reality. This is the world that you exist in today. And you look at YouTube, you know, again, the numbers are astronomical when you look at the monthly active users. The same for Instagram. And why is this important? Is because this space is accessible to you. It's a tool that when used correctly, deliberately, and in an authentic manner can be extremely fantastic. At the same time, when it's not, it can be detrimental. You know, and those are the things, again, that I want us to just explore as a group and really, you know, be realistic about what employers look at and, you know, how this open kind of fields is used in today's world. So when you look at, you know, why all of this matters, right, and why it matters for all of us, you know, the reality is that 70% of employers are looking through candidates' social media, right? So when you think about that, you know, do you stop posting the way that you do? You know, what are things that you may kind of refrain from or not? You know, the goal, I always think, particularly working in this space, is you have to be yourself, right? You have to be authentic, but also being cognizant, again, of what you're putting out there and what the workforce looks like today and how employers are using this information. Obviously, I'm not an attorney. You know, I don't know the rules and regulations for every single corporation when it comes to HR policies if, you know, something that you post on social media can be used against you or not. But knowing that in today's workforce, people are looking online for what you're putting out there. 57, sorry, no, go back, please. No, it's okay. So 57% are less likely to interview a candidate that they can't find online. And I'll kind of pause there, you know. When you think about, you know, again, your friends and, you know, you meet someone, what's sometimes the first thing that you do? You go online, you know, and again, you know, just being honest in the term of a dialogue here, if you find something that perhaps is a little bit off, you know, and you think about a first impression, what's the first thought that comes to your mind? You know, do you use that material just even in your mindset to make an opinion about this person? A lot of the times we do, you know, and again, the goal is not for anyone to stop being authentic or themselves, but it's also to recognize, you know, what you're putting out there is creating that digital footprint, like you mentioned, and essentially are the building blocks of that brand that you're creating for yourself, you know. And I think it's become an automatic response. You know, you meet someone or you go somewhere, you tend to just within minutes or seconds, just look them up, see what they're about, you know. And you have to think about if that's your behavior, that's everyone's behavior for the most part, particularly in the workforce. This next point I find really interesting, and this is just a legitimate fact, that 54% of employers have decided not to hire a candidate based on social media profiles. What's your opinion on that? Think it's fair, not fair? No right or wrong answers, just your, you know, yeah.
I think that their content in their social media reflects themselves. So, for example, if a person posts something not good for like a job, it reflects.
And
It doesn't. Oh,
is it on? Yeah.
it just reflects the person. It doesn't. I mean,
Right. You know, I think the irony in that particular point. That's not fair because that is my personal profile and that's what I'm doing on my own time. The reality is that, you know, judgments are being made based on what's out there, you know, and I guess if there's any message that I can, you know, send to this group, again, particularly as you start, you know, graduating and getting into the workforce, is being cognizant of that because, you know, I have my own personal opinions in terms of, you know, you can be who you are on a personal level and don't judge me on that, you know, as it pertains to work. But if we know that employers are looking on social media or even just online in terms of who you are, having that in the back of your mind is something that's relatively critical, I think, in this day and age. And then this next point, I think, is just really important, and this is what's going to lead us to kind of like the deeper part of the conversation, which is social recruiting has just become part of, HR departments. It just has. Again, no longer are the days where you would put an ad somewhere, you send your resume. At the end of the day, I have my opinions about a resume. It only says so much about yourself. But as communication majors, right, which I believe probably most of us in this room are, we're leaving a body of work. We're putting our message out there. We all have a voice. We all have things that we want to say and really connect with the consumers with. And HR departments are looking at that, particularly when you think of everyone in the fields of communication, right? So knowing that, I always think preparation, having a game plan and really being really honest with yourself is very important, right? And just taking a moment of pause and thinking about, okay, what are those things that I should have? What are those things that I should be arming myself with to make sure that if anyone is looking me up, or if I am, meeting someone at a conference, all these opportunities that the university offers you to network, what is it that people are going to find when I'm out there? And I always think, in life, you got to keep things simple, right? Going back to the basics is really important. And I find that sometimes people miss that step. We overcomplicate things. We say, oh my God, it has to be this big fancy. It doesn't. Stick to the basics. And this is in the next slide. This is really, I think, kind of golden rules, when you're thinking about how you're positioning yourself, your digital brand, you as a person, that you want to make sure that you have. And again, they're basic, but you'd be surprised if you go down that list, you may not have all of them. It happens even to me, myself. I'm running around, have 2 kids, I have my life, my professional life, and there's moments when I pause and I realize, oh my gosh, I'm slacking in some of these areas. And if someone were to look me up, they're not finding the best of me. They're not finding who I really want to project out there. So I think the first thing is having a game plan, right? And I'll ask you just an honest question. How many of you feel that you have your game plan in terms of the brand that you're putting out there? Anyone?
I feel like
You do? Can you share maybe what your, since it seems like it's a minority? Yeah.
now it's on. Is it working?
Yeah.
Hello? Oh, okay. Sorry, my bad. So I feel like over time I've maybe matured and kind of grown with technology as it's. Oh, hi, I'm Kiera. So I feel like as technology has been progressing, I've been maturing with it. So growing up, I didn't really understand why my mom was like, be careful what you put out on the internet. It's a big representation of yourself. And I was like, yeah, Mom, okay, whatever. All my friends are posting this kind of stuff. I want to fit in. And then when you look back on all the stuff you've posted like 2013, 2014, you're like, wow, this isn't something I want, my colleagues or even the professional people I want to work with in the future to see me as. I'm not that person. So I've been very cautious of what I post. And, I try to put the best positive stuff out there. So definitely changing with technology and progressing with it and noticing a lot more stuff with time. So.
That's great. I mean, I think, self-awareness is really important. And again, which is why I like to just kind of pause, on these elements right here, which is, if you're not stopping to think about it, then I would say if there's anything you take away from, our conversation today is that. Take a moment to just really pause and assess what your reality looks like, right? Assess the things that you're doing, more than anything to be authentic, because I think on social media and particularly on digital, you don't have to create a false image of yourself either, right? You want to put your best foot forward, but authenticity is also key. Again, particularly as communication majors, if you're a journalist, if you're a writer, if you're creating content, a piece of you goes into that product. And if you're able to successfully be authentic and be yourself, it just goes such a long way. So I think, being aware, and even if it means being aware enough to know, heck, I don't have a game plan. I'm not thinking about this stuff, then please do it, because that'll be critical. I think the next thing is professional headshot. And again, I'm going back to basics, and I'll ask the question, how many of us in this room have a professional headshot? That's great. You'd be surprised, even folks that, my stage in their career, they don't have one. And please know, a professional headshot does not have to be in a formal studio or what have you. Again, it's an image of you that represents who you are in your most authentic self. And again, it goes back to when someone looks for you, when someone searches for you, you know, what are those images that you want to pop up? You want them to represent who you are, you know, and if you don't have it, again, these are back to basics, things that you want to, you know, put in your pocket and do it. There's plenty of ways to get a professional headshot. I know sometimes even at work, you know, for a particular event, we always get asked for that. You know, if you're going to speak somewhere, or even if, you know, you're going to become part of a new team, every single org chart always has a professional headshot. Again, it sounds basic, but they're critically important, right? Next is your updated resume, right? Again, you know, you may be a student, maybe there's things that you're like, well, you know what, I don't have 3,600 things to show for yet. That's perfectly okay. But something, again, that can easily be shared with someone that you're speaking to, someone that you meet, that again represents you. In today's world, information is expected to be transferred fast and quickly. A day turnaround is a long time. I'll be really honest with you, particularly in the world of digital and social media. So knowing that, understanding it, you know, having your game plan, what are those tools that you're putting in your little professional toolbox, right? That when you meet the right person or the right opportunity comes around, you can say, hey, you know what? I'm ready to go. Here's my resume. Here's where you can find me. This next one here, you know, put LinkedIn on there. This is, again, back to basics, right? Network on there. Professionals are on there. HR professionals are always looking on there, you know. Start branding yourself on these platforms, right? You know, who would, even if you're a student, you know, what it is that you're accomplishing, that you've done. You know, again, I'll ask, are any of you on LinkedIn now? Do you ever search on there? Good. Good for you. All of us should be on there. Even if we have nice and steady professions and nice and steady jobs, it's a great networking opportunity. And that's another point, you know, that I'll get to, which is how critical understanding your industry universe is, who the players are, you know, what are those industry leaders that you're interested in knowing more about, you know. You'd be surprised. I was always really pleasantly surprised, particularly when I first started my career, when you reach out to folks that sometimes you may think they'll never in a million years kind of connect with me back, you'd be surprised how many people would. There's a lot of senior leaders that are always willing and happy to just give back, to help someone out. Find those vehicles and those mediums that you can just put yourself out there with and connect with team members. I'll stop there for a second. Just, is there any questions on any of this? Any comments? No? All right, perfect. Oh, whoa. Surprise. Surprise. Well, in the meantime, on that, I'll kind of skip to one of the things that I mentioned, which was the networking aspect, right, of how critical it is for all of us. And I'll ask a question, you know, how many of you feel that you do it enough? Networking, or not?
I mean,
Yeah.
in my job, I'm like a bartender and I work for the radio station, so I meet so many people at my job. It's crazy. So, like, thank you again.
Great.
I'm back, guys. Okay, so I'm a bartender. So at my job, I come across like NFL football players, even people in the work like environment field. So that's how I found my radio job that I'm working at now. And initially, when I enrolled at FIU, I wanted to do broadcasting. But after working with Lucy Lopez and Kenny Walker, they're like, you know what? You already have your foot in the door. You can just work your way up. Why don't you just do a plan B? And that's why I'm now majoring in PR and minor in marketing. But, I mean, you have to always brand yourself even out there. And I always try to market myself. And even so, there's so many job opportunities that are given to me, like, while I'm working. I'm like, wow, okay, I'll take your business card. Sure, no problem. And it's awesome. So I'm actually very grateful for working in the bar.
Good for you. And you know what? That's a perfect example, because I think any scenario that you're in is always an opportunity to network. It just is. Anyone that you meet, anyone that you just have a conversation with, please think of that as an extension of networking. You'd be surprised. And I'll say, I think particularly when you start your career, You'd be surprised. That initial group of people, it's almost like when you're in high school and you're graduating class, that initial group of people, building those relationships, putting your best foot forward, creating the right types of relationships, down the line, it pays off, and it pays off so well. People will pay it forward. You find yourself paying it forward too. I think the power of network is something that I personally wish when I first started my career, I thought more about, my leadership would tell me a little bit more about, because it is tremendous and the benefits are forever kind of, paying it forward. In addition to that, these three I'll kind of like bucket together, which is authenticity, content, and know your audience, right? These are critical. I think it's always important for all of us, anyone in any career, to know your audience, right? Know who it is that you're trying to reach, who it is that you're speaking to, what is the objective in terms of that conversation. I see it so many times, and I've seen it really throughout the course of my career, where someone has a phenomenal message, a phenomenal idea, something great that they can pitch and could turn into just really a home run. And because they weren't in tune with their audience, they weren't really educated enough in terms of who they're speaking to, it falls flat. For me, like I think about today, right? And I think the most important part for me in preparation and thinking about what we were going to talk about was really everyone in this room, right? Thinking about the audience, thinking about who you guys are, where you're at in your life, and bringing you something that's relevant for you, and content and information that you can walk out of here with. I can't express that enough, how important it is. Whenever you're going to meet with someone, whenever you're going someplace, try to really just understand who that audience is. In meetings and negotiations, trust me, that is so critical and so key. And again, all this information exists. It's out there. It's not in a little bubble somewhere. And then definitely, focus. I think focusing on the right things is so important. My former boss, he always used to tell us this, and every day that goes by, I think about it more and more. You're gonna have so many things out there that can distract you. I always call it noise, because that's the world we live on, right? You have 36,000 pieces of information and platforms and ideas and problems and issues and opportunities coming your way, but know when to focus, and know what you're focusing on, and target it really well. I think we're all always encouraged to multitask and, oh my God, do 1,000 things. That's okay, but also know when to focus and do what you need to do to focus. There's a certain energy about that when you have something that you're zeroing in on, and that's your goal, and that's where your head is at. There's an energy that you bring to that when you're kind of here, there, and everywhere, it gets a little bit diluted. Any questions there? No? Okay. So obviously, in theory, all these things are great, must-haves, so on and so forth. But again, bringing it down to basics, and where do we start, right? So we can go here. I think the first thing, and I can't stress this enough, right, is take ownership. You have to do that. You have to know it. You have to understand what that means. And really, you're in control. You're in the driver's seat, right, from pretty much everything. Obviously, life happens, and there's things that are outside of our control. But when it comes to your career, your path, take ownership of it. Again, be deliberate. Things don't have to kind of happen to you. You can really carve out a path. And again, life takes you where it needs to take you, but take that ownership. There's always, a saying that I've heard many times at work. It's don't be a renter, be an owner. Take pride in what you're doing. So when you think about your personal brand, the only one who can truly take ownership of that is you. Only you can craft the messages that you're putting out there, who you're networking with. Are you prepared? Do you have your resume? All of this good stuff really comes down to the ownership that you take. And then uncover your digital footprint. I encourage, and we'll do a little exercise in about a second or two. It's, take a look and see, if you were searching for you, what would you find? And what would you think about that? And is it really what you want out there? And if it's not, what would you tweak? But I think that that's important, and again, it goes myself, as well. Every now and then I take a moment of pause and I'm like, oh man, I wish I could tweak this a little bit, and I find it and I figure out a way to do it. I think that's absolutely critical. And then I think, be cognizant again of that audience. And if the image that you're trying to portray, let's just for an example, if you're a journalist and you're creating content and you're putting it out there, you're putting your pieces of content out there, be cognizant of what those pieces are, see how folks are reacting to it. And again, it's being honest with yourself and just taking that moment to see what it is of that brand of yours that is out there right now. So what I want to do is let's just take a few minutes, it's a little quick exercise, and Google yourself. Go ahead and Google yourself.
Oh no, I'm just joking.
Okay, go ahead. Go to the next one.
Well, this is awesome.
Are you surprised at what you're finding?
I didn't know there could be so much information.
Oh yeah. Remember, digital footprint, it lives forever and ever.
Oh, my mom popped up.
Yeah. Is everyone with their heads down? So is anyone finding anything that you would consider a red flag? Any surprises? Yeah, go ahead.
I just found like a Facebook account that is like not me at all,
Okay.
and I know my name is like
Right.
not common, so I'm pretty sure this is like a scam, and it's scary, and I'm about to report it right now.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other red flags? Any nice surprises?
There's nothing about me.
Okay. Are you surprised? Is that how you want it? Is
Not particularly.
you're not surprised? Are you okay with that? That there's
Yeah.
that's how you would. Okay.
What do you find when my name is some guy who did the visual effects for like Guardians of the Galaxy?
right.
So that's it.
Okay. All right. So I'll ask you a question if you don't mind. What's your major?
Public relations.
Public relations. So as someone who does public relations, or that's obviously your ultimate goal, would you want to start perhaps creating a digital and social brand for yourself so that the type of work that you do or going to do is out there? Is that something that you think would be beneficial?
Nothing more than LinkedIn.
Nothing more than LinkedIn.
And I'm
Di-
already on that.
You're already on that.
Yeah. Probably not.
You're probably not. Okay. And you know what? The good thing is there is no wrong or right. I think everything has to be within your comfort zone, and if that's where you're okay, which is, hey, you know what I want to be popping up is popping up and it's LinkedIn, then that's a good thing. You're comfortable with where that is. And really that's the point of the exercise, which is take a look at what's coming up, because there is no wrong or right. But for example, on your end, you're finding this account that obviously it's not yours. We did a similar exercise the last time, and a few of the students did find things that they were like, holy crap, this is not me, this is not what I want out there. But I think, taking the time again to see what it is that you have out there, particularly for anyone who is, has the ambitions of being content creators, and you're already putting pieces of your work out there, whether it's video or graphics or stories, are the right ones coming up? Are they the type of things that you want anyone who's searching for you to see? That's honestly extremely important, and I would recommend do it and do it often. Definitely don't let that be something that just kind of sits there and that you never look at again, because you may have a change of heart, let's say, I don't know, in 6 months, where you want something else that you've published to kind of be out there. You want to make sure that it's there and it's there in the right type of context. So go ahead and to the next one. All the way up. So I think, obviously with everything digital and social media, and again, when I think of the audience, you guys have grown up in this environment. I, for one, graduated 20 years ago. It wasn't even a speck in my mind, right? So one of the things that I have learned, and I will honestly hammer it down to anyone who's young in my team and who's starting off, is the absolutely necessary need to embrace change as it pertains to digital and social media, right? Again, as communication majors, as journalist majors, you're constantly distributing your content, you're constantly distributing your message, and you have to be nimble. You have to be able to embrace change. I can tell you right now, something that may have been solid and true in my world when I left this morning, when I get back to the office, there could be a completely different product that now I have to assess and determine, what, I have to either learn how to use it or this doesn't work for what I'm trying to do. That's the reality of technology. That's the reality of social media. And again, particularly for communication majors, you need to absolutely be nimble. I would say, I consider myself a very private person. So every time that a new platform comes out, sometimes I struggle with just putting my information out there. But I still use it, I still consume it, sometimes I'll create a fake account, to be honest with you, just to play with it. I can't emphasize enough as communication majors how important that will always be. And you see it where, print at one point was everything, and then who consumes print anymore? A very, very small percent of the population, and it goes back to your audience. Where will people consume that content and information that you're putting out there? Embracing change is critical. I've noticed through the years, change is something very hard for a lot of people, even very young people. You would think, you have nothing to lose. It's kind of, I'm being stereotypical right now, but you're like, okay, I'll take it, change. Let me adapt to the next new thing. That doesn't come easy for everyone. And if it's something that doesn't come easy for you, I definitely encourage you just to know what your comfort zone is, step outside of that comfort zone, and really force yourself to embrace that change, because that's a constant in our industry and 100% always will be. Let's go ahead to the next one. Something really, again, critical as it pertains to all of your careers and technology and digital and social media is the need to really stay informed, right? And like I was speaking of earlier, understand how technology is affecting your career in your industry, because it does. It affects all of us. Find those pockets of resources where you're getting your information and you're understanding. Again, if I'm a journalist, right, what is this new tool or what is this new distribution piece? How is that going to help me? If you're not doing it already, I would encourage you to, sign up for whatever digital publications exist, wherever you're getting your information, to really stay in tune with that. Because like I mentioned, what may have been relevant in the morning, by the afternoon, it's not. And it's definitely a reality you can't escape, particularly in our business. Another key one I would say is definitely know who the key players are, right? So I'll toss that out as a question. In your respective majors, ask yourself, how many of you in here feel that you know who the key players are and you're comfortable with knowing who they are? Just kind of show of hands. Okay, one person. Listen, it's okay. Again, there's no wrong or right, but I would say take the time, pause, and start identifying who are the key players as it pertains to your field, in your industry. Who are those thought leaders? Whether it's senior leadership in a company or up-and-comers that, again, are putting their message out there that you could perhaps either consume what they're saying or learn more about them. I can't express to you how important that is. You want to use that. It's critical in terms of how you're learning. Otherwise, you're kind of missing out. So I would say if you're not sure who they are, research, ask, even ask your professors. Did it go away again? Is it?
The computer's on Active Directory and they have it set to every 15 minutes go to sleep, which unfortunately we didn't think of that before this.
It's okay. Any questions kind of so far while? No? Okay, so I'll throw one out there. So when it comes to understanding kind of like who the key thought leaders are in your profession or your industry, is there something specifically that perhaps is maybe stopping you from understanding that information? It's just a question that I'm asking. Or no? No? do you think there's like value in it? Is it, is it hard to just find who those folks are?
I mean, I haven't really taken the time to look
Right.
into it just yet because like I was saying before, I just switched majors.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I know, I think we all like switch all the time. Well, I would definitely say, that's something, again, in the message of just taking a moment of pause, and getting your game plan together on the things that we spoke about. I think that's a really critical one. Really understand in your industry, who are those key players? Who are the ones that are making an impact? And also, how are they doing it? What are the means that they're using to really kind of get there, right? And seek the resources, do your own research. And I think the most important thing is, and this will be critical, I promise you, for the rest of your career as you build your personal brands, particularly in the world of technology, digital and social media, is know when you're not learning. Know when you've reached a place where you're not really expanding yourself, learning more about it. You've kind of hit a plateau. And that, again, is extremely critical for us as communication majors and in the world of digital and social media, because there's always going to be something new out there. I think to kind of imagine in your mind, oh my God, I've reached a point where I know it all, would probably be just not a good step. Always know and know yourself enough. You know what? Right now, I'm not really consuming anything new. I'm not getting anything new, and go out there and seek the information. To the next one. Can we go to the next? Oh, go ahead. All right. So again, I always think in theory, it's great to say, hey, you know what? I can do this, X, Y, and Z, but just some practical, just kind of tips in terms of how, right? I think be comfortable with the unknown. I can't tell you how many times, again, throughout the course of my career, you'll sit in a meeting, right? And you're there to solve a problem. You're there to solve a business problem. Again, particularly in digital and social media, where everything is real time, it's immediate. You have to just kind of make things happen, right there on the spot. And no one will ask a single question, and I encourage you guys, always ask. If you don't know, don't walk out of the room not knowing. That all goes, back to your personal brand. It is okay to ask questions because you want to walk out being informed. There's nothing wrong with it. There's never a dumb question. And I say that because you'll realize that, as you move forward, and you may have already. Sometimes you're in a class and the professor's giving you a lecture, you're talking about something, and you know that there has to be questions because, it's okay, and no one will ask a question. Definitely step out of that comfort zone and be comfortable with just the unknown, that you don't know it. That's absolutely key. I think adjusting your mindset, really be curious. That's the most important thing, particularly as it pertains to digital and social and that brand that you're building for yourself. I can't stress it enough. Step outside of your comfort zone. If you are, again, a content creator, which a lot of us will be on this path, find those platforms that will allow for you to create content and publish it and have it out there. Step outside of your comfort zone. Be curious. Always ask questions. Try to find something new. That is honestly at the key of everything, particularly for us, as professionals and as you develop your brands. Otherwise, you become stale. You just do. You kind of hit a plateau. And it's okay if that's your comfort zone. But I think if it's not, push yourself. Make yourself go the extra mile, because that's extremely important and critical. And I think definitely be nimble. I'll tell you right now, we just moved to a new facility, in my employment, and it's, a little bit different. You don't have assigned seating, it's different for some folks where you're used to coming in and having your own office. And I think about that and I'm like, if you're not nimble, in your professions, even with your personal brands, that's tough. Be flexible, go with the flow, embrace change, force yourself to do that, because in our industry, in our careers, in our chosen path, everything moves very, very quickly. And changing that mindset and knowing, change is the one constant, I think, in our field and our careers, and particularly, when you throw in technology in the mix, you want your brand to be one that's associated with this person is nimble. I can tell you throughout the years I've seen when decisions are made about who can move forward, who can take on a leadership position, who can continue to grow, who am I going to give X project to, it usually comes down to a lot of these things. It's that person that can be nimble, that can embrace change, that's just curious. It's always looking for something new. And honestly, that's extremely critical. And it goes back to when you think of your brands, what you're putting out there, how you're representing yourself. These are key attributes that you definitely want out there. So I would say, in a nutshell, at the end of the day, your digital footprint matters. It does. It absolutely does. Be aware of it. Be cognizant of it. Be deliberate with it. Even if there's nothing about you that's out there, then that's okay, as long as you're comfortable with it. If there are things that, are out there in the digital and social space about you, representative of your brand, be aware of it. Take ownership of it. Be deliberate with it. Get in the driver's seat of the content that you're pushing out there with authenticity, obviously, because you always want to be yourself, but definitely be very aware of it because it does matter. I think, definitely, and you know this better than anyone else, right? The power of social media is endless. Use it. Use it to your advantage. Use it to make the right connections. Use it to truly build your digital brand, as a professional, who you are. Don't take it for granted because it is being used. It's used by employers. It's used by your peers. Make it work for you. You've reached that point, obviously, in your professions as you're getting out there now into the workforce where, again, get into that driver's seat and really make it work for you because you can. And if anybody knows how to use that medium, I think is the group in here. Kind of go down.
Somebody is taking control. I think it's a little.
Oh, is it? Okay. And then I definitely think, have a game plan. Have your digital footprint game plan. Be an active participant in it. I know that we're all running around. We're limited for time. Take the moment of pause. I genuinely encourage you to do that and think it through a little bit. You may not have all the answers, but start putting it into place. I always say, have a buddy system, someone who can give you honest feedback. I think there's nothing better than having a teammate or a colleague who you can sit with and say, hey, you know what do you think about this? Give me your honest opinion, But again, be deliberate about it and just have that game plan because it goes 1,000 miles over. Taking ownership, like we talked about earlier, that's the key to everything, and you'll notice it. You'll see folks who are not taking ownership and you see the difference, and it's okay because it's a choice. But if you're someone who definitely, you take pride in what you're doing and you want to create a certain path for yourself, you have the power in your hands to take that ownership. You have all these resources at your disposal, all these tools, use them effectively. And I think definitely embracing change like we talked about, and more than anything, stay hungry. Know when you're not hungry anymore and ask yourself why. If you're hungry and you're driven, you're going to push yourself to do all of these things. And that's an energy that's noticeable from anyone, and it goes back to when you think of employers and, as you step forward now into your careers and really your next life stage, that hunger is something so unique. You can't teach it to someone. There's no professor that can ever give you the manual of what that means, but know it, have that fire in your belly because it's going to propel you forward, and it's really going to force you to kind of do all of these things. And then honestly, lastly, and this is, sorry, just want to stay on that one up there. This is really just a quote that I live by and I believe in, and I truly think it's accurate, which is, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And it's the truth. There's no such thing as random luck, right? You prepare, you do what you need to do, you get your game plan, you make sure that, you have that digital footprint in place of who you are, that message that you're putting out there, because that opportunity will come, because it does. It happens to all of us time and time again. And you want to make sure that when it does, you know that at least on your end, you did everything that you could leading up to that moment, right? Nothing is perfect. There's no wrong or right. But that level of preparation and just initiative and getting yourself there, it will go a long way when that opportunity comes around. And surprisingly enough, it comes in all shapes and forms. Sometimes it's in the most unexpected ways. But if you're building yourself up to that moment, you're building your brand, who you are, you're using these digital and social media platforms to put out there the image of who you are and who you want to be professionally, it goes a really, really long way. So with that, I know we have few minutes left, about 10 minutes. Definitely want to open up any comments, questions, any questions whatsoever. It's fine. Oh.
No, your turn. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So I kind of missed your intro. I'm wondering if you have a team around you and how you encourage kind of curiosity, flexibility, all those kinds of things, because some of those things, like, I feel like come natural to people. Like,
Yeah.
curiosity may become natural to someone, or embracing change may become natural. But how do you encourage them as a leader?
You know, I'll tell you this. I was really fortunate at the very beginning of my career. You know, I had phenomenal leadership, and I did. You know, as you mentioned, I worked at Zuby Advertising, which was phenomenal, and that was it was almost like a model for me. You know, and it was always encouraged in us, and it was a message that was sent over and over again, and not just by saying it out loud, but by doing it. So for me, I think I do have a team. I have a young team, which I love. You know, some people are natural and phenomenal individual contributors. Others are great managers, and that's what they love to do. That's the bucket that I fall into, right? I love to just manage and have a team. And I try to lead by example. You know, if I see myself stalling and I stop, that's the vibe that my team gets. So I keep myself honest, like I was talking about before. I self-regulate, I check, as hard as it is. Sometimes I don't like what I see. Sometimes I'm like, being negative. I'm not being curious. I'm not being hungry. And I have to self-assess, because ultimately I'm impacting these people that are in a particular stage in their career. That's a responsibility that I have. So I would say, in simple terms, is keep myself honest and really lead by the example of it. So great question. Anyone else? Yep, go ahead.
How did you go from advertising from that company? Thank you. How did you go advertising from that company to into Univision? What made you change, or did you come across something in the road and you're like, okay, this is no longer?
Yeah, great question. I'm
For me?
Telemundo, by the way. And,
Telemundo, sorry.
Yeah, I'm here as a representative of myself, you know, not for the company, but that's a great question, right? And I'll tell you why. Careers are long. They're forever. Our lives are unique to all of us, and our circumstances are individual to us, right? I started in the advertising side of the world because I wanted to. That was when I got out of college. I'm like, that's what I want to do. I know this is going to be boot camp for me. I'm going to learn so much, so on and so forth. After about 8-10 years of being at Zuby, I have 2 little girls. I have a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old. I had my first daughter, and I traveled a lot, and, you know, it was a different pace. And it did something to me, right? And I realized, oh my gosh, you know, I didn't have boundaries. I didn't know how to say no, because for, you know, my entire 20s, my focus was my career. It's what I wanted to do, and I loved it. And all of a sudden, I had my first baby, and I struggled. I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't easy for me, and I struggled internally. And I told my husband, have an extremely supportive partner, and he was phenomenal. I said, you know what, I need to take a moment of pause. I need to figure this out, because right now, you know, I'm not in the place where I need to be. Hardest decision ever professionally, because I loved the Zubis, I loved what I was doing. And then, you know, as the introduction said earlier, I am a teacher at heart. I love academics, and I taught for 2 years. And I found this amazing principal at a charter school. He changed my life. He gave me an opportunity. The state of Florida at the time had a extreme shortage of teachers, so they had a certificate program. If you had your degree, you could go through the course and you could teach, and I did. I taught 6th grade for 2 years. Phenomenal, changed my life, best experience ever. But I realized that, you know what, I loved my career. And, you know, it was something that I embraced and I loved, and I can be a mom and I can have my career. And you know what, I have to figure this out, because although teaching was phenomenal, it wasn't my passion, you know. And again, figuring out, taking ownership, being accountable for what you're doing. Thankfully, I had made great friends, great relationships, like I mentioned to you earlier, you know, those networking opportunities and those bridges that you build. And, you know, someone that I respect tremendously, he had just started at the company that I'm at now, and he was building a team. And I said, hey, you know what? This teaching thing was phenomenal, but I want to give this a shot again. I think I realized the things where I need to tweak on my personal life. And he did. And here I am, you know, 5 years later, and I'm loving it. And I found my balance. You know, I found my boundaries. I found that happy medium between my family and my career, and I'm in a great place. So I know it's a little long-winded, and I say that to you because you're all going to have your own path, and you have a professional path, but you're also human. You have your life too, right? And it does impact kind of where you go and where you don't. And going back to everything that we talked about, you know, having your action plan, a game plan, who you are as a brand. You know, I had developed who I was as a brand, so when I called my colleague, I already had that history with him, so he knew what I was bringing to the table. You know, getting that opportunity, I didn't have to sell myself all over again because I had built that with him, you know? And that, I guess, is my biggest message to everyone here about how critical it is to develop who you are, your brand, your professional brand. That.
Thank you
Vivian?
for sharing your
Yes.
experience.
Any other questions? I know we're like right on. No?
It's late, I'm sorry, so
No.
I'm a little bit, you know.
Okay.
I don't have any questions, but I would love to. What are some tips that you can give people?
Yeah.
What are some tips that you can give people when they're starting their own brand, their own like they're just starting? I know with to be authentic and all of that, but with so many competition that now you have, because like Instagram, there's so many people that are doing the same thing. So what is something that you can do to call the difference, to make the difference out there?
I think a few things. I think it starts with knowing yourself, right? Like who you are, what are you? Taking a moment to pause and think about that, you know? Everybody has strengths, everybody has weaknesses. Know what they are, you know what those key things that you bring to the table that are unique to you that nobody else does, right? I think it starts there. Second to that, I think, is know your audience, right? Know the key players in your industry, know the competition, you know? Understand what they're doing, not because you need to copy it, but because it also gives you some insight as to the playing field that you're in. And then put that in a bucket and move forward with who you are. That's the key thing, your focus, understanding more than anything, what is it that you bring to the table that's different than anybody else's, and being comfortable with that, you know, because I think the biggest mistake I think anyone can make, and again, this is just my personal opinion, is, you know, I can't be you, you can't be me. Even if I try, I just can't do it, you know? And I've learned through the years, like, I've accepted what my weaknesses are, I know what they are, but I'm very aware of what my strengths are. And that's what I play up, and that's what I try to build on, you know? So I would say that, like, take a moment of pause. Even if you make a list, I do that all the time. Just, what are those top 3 things that make me me, you know? And put that out there, and put it out there in the right way, and see the response that you get. Is that?
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Other questions? I think we're right on.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you.
I just want to thank our speaker today. I think these
Thank
are
you.
extremely useful points for you all in the positions you're in right now and where you're going to be going. And you know what she mentioned was she asked you earlier to Google yourselves. If I'm looking for someone, I'm looking for a speaker or an expert, I don't go to LinkedIn first. I go to Google. And I think you're going to find that most people are going to do that, employers. So be careful what is out there about you on Google. And also, LinkedIn is very important, and every one of you should be on it. I saw some hands that didn't go up before. Go home and get yourselves on LinkedIn. But it is so important to build that brand for yourselves. So thank you so much. This
No,
was
thank
very,
you for
very
having me.
valuable.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks again for coming.